Did you record to the cloud last week?
I think I just recorded to my computer.
Okay, cool. Then we have space.
It's online though.
Yeah, I
Okay.
saw. Sorry. Well, cool. Yeah, guys, we're gonna talk about
Our favorite topic.
our favorite topic because it's something that I think everybody feels like is obvious, but we all kind of struggle with it, which is resting and what rest really means, how we can rest better, how we can develop rest day routines, especially for people who struggle with taking rests. We've worked with a number of athletes who we've had to talk out of over time, like the run streaking.
Don't
Uh,
run streak, y'all.
yeah, where they run, for months and months with never taking a rest day and things like that. On this call, we're going to tell you why that's probably a bad idea.
I'd say 3 days at a time is great.
Yeah.
3 days in a row is a great streak.
Um,
Can end it there.
yeah.
And then do 2 days and then rest again.
Yeah.
And
Rest
then do
is,
3 more days. And then you do that for 10 years and then you're somewhere.
or five,
5 years is also
three,
pretty good, but like 10 years is
one.
better. 1 year, awesome.
Yeah.
And then if you do that 10 times.
Zoe is very long-term focused, as you can see. Um,
I've got years before my prime ultra years. I'm a little
yes,
baby ultra runner.
you are. All right. Well, let's keep this on topic. Yeah, we're going to talk about rest and recovery. If you guys have any questions about this or ideas or like routines that you like to do on your rest days, please provide in the chat box. And or if you have something that you want to add, I'd be happy to also let you speak for a few minutes. I think everybody kind of has their individual routine that helps them get through and utilize rest days. And I think all of there's space for all of the kind of different iterations of the broader topics that we're gonna talk about. And all the things that we talk about can be applied to running or your job or something else that you're doing that you need to take a break from. Um, so yeah,
I
like
was actually thinking about that today because like I was doing research on how rest helps us combat the impact forces from running and I was like, man, I'm really feeling the impact forces from like riding. Like I realized that my brain isn't literally like developing micro fractures or like tiny tears, but it kind of feels like it
yeah.
from a long day at work. And so rest helps us combat that too, metaphorically.
Well, what I'm kind of hearing is you're pushing the stress threshold a
Yeah,
little
it
bit
was a
at
little bit of
work.
a tempo run today at work.
Yeah, so like we really like the very simple equation that stress plus rest equals growth. We're big
Or
subscribers
adaptation.
of that, or
So
adaptation,
like
growth or adaptation.
stress, another way to look at stress is like stimulus. So whether that's like a certain amount of miles, a certain amount of intensity, like that's your specific training. So stress plus rest, like resting on purpose, like being intentional, like having it be an equal part of the equation as the stress. When you add those two things together, you get adaptation. Without one or the other, you don't get adaptation. So, like, a really easy way to think about how important stress is like imagine, I think a lot of people think stress, stress, stress equals adaptation. Obviously that's not correct. Think about it if on like the other ideological extreme, rest, rest, rest equals adaptation. Like obviously taking 9 months off running isn't a great way to go PR your marathon. So either ideology taken to its most extreme is flawed.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's kind of the interesting, I think that's kind of what I was hearing from you with your workflow today is that you were kind of pushing up against the part of stress that helps you to kind of start to provoke those adaptations. And then we need to get to the rest part of things where we can really then allow the growth to happen or the adaptation to happen. So like, yes, like what we're saying is like manageable challenges, things that just are like just manageable where they're pushing you.
Training.
Training is one of those things, maybe a tough project at work, whatever it might be. That stuff is really vital to your growth, right? So like any projects, endeavors that you have that push you, it's necessary. If you shy away from those things, you can almost certainly expect to have less successes in those areas because you need to push yourself. You need to experience that discomfort and get used to that discomfort in order to get better. And I think trail running, as trail runners were and ultra runners, we're so lucky to have the running experience because it gives us this very acute, like, yes, this is us me getting used to being uncomfortable for X number of time. And then afterwards, I get to like put my feet up and eat a pizza, and I'm gonna start to grow from that experience. So like I kind of like to think about like each like thing that I'm doing that's really stressful as like productive stress. And almost like productive failure. It's kind of something that Zoe talked about on the DNF podcast, but it really relates back to training because when our bodies are under this chronic and very acute stress for days and days and days without taking a rest, all we do is continue to load our bodies with the chronic stress. And sorry, I had to mute somebody and I lost my train of thought. That chronic stress is really great, but at a certain point, it becomes detrimental, right? Like if our stress buckets overflow, which we talked about, where we're no longer that stress is no longer productive in those situations. So yeah, the
So we're
stress
here.
half of the
Yeah.
equation is super important. That allows us, when used with rest, to get better.
And I think that something that a lot of athletes, particularly very motivated athletes, initially struggle with is feeling like they're not being productive on rest days, which is like psychologically very cruel because that is, in fact, when the most adaptations are happening. So, we're here to spend as much time as possible talking about how productive rest is and how you can reframe rest to embrace it a little bit better in your life and understand that not only is it's not just something that like weak people do or unmotivated people do or like whatever, lies that like no days off hashtag fitness culture tells you, that it's like I would rather an athlete skip every workout and every run than miss a rest day.
Yeah, I agree. And that's because we need to think about rest as being integral to the training process, as we've kind of just mentioned in so many
But
different
it's like
words.
it's not just integral to them. Like if you are training for an ultra and you like don't get your long runs in, it's not great, but you have other things to support your training,
Hmm.
right? If you miss all of your rest days, then you're never even getting the adaptation. So it's like it's as if you never even trained in the first place, right? Like I think, I mean there's an adage that's like, it's I mean it's always like you can show up to a race undertrained and do okay, but if you show up overtrained, you are not going to do okay. You are going to have a bad time.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I think is really important to understand when we're actually taking that rest is, how we're utilizing that time and why it's
Mm.
important. Running is a little bit different than your workflow and things like that, but they are very related in the same way. So if you're working really hard and you're getting to that kind of impasse part of your work where you're struggling to like work through something that's difficult, stepping back and taking a break, sometimes that break provides for the breakthrough that happens later. Often people don't have their greatest ideas while they're sitting at the computer stressing over something that they're having trouble with. Often they step back. Something that Zoe does is she goes for walks. Other people do this too. And then they come back and they've got that great idea in order, to write something for Trail Runner or for DNF, and then they move forward with it. So taking that break, it applies with running too, because your musculoskeletal system can only handle so much pounding over so many days before the breakdown occurs, and then the breakdown occurs at this crazy level that you weren't expecting, and all of a sudden you're injured or you're burned out. So like, hold on. So like behind the scenes, what's happening when you're running and and all that chronic stress is occurring in your training is you're on a cellular level. There's a ton of breakdown that you don't notice, and if you skip that rest day, often you don't realize how, like it might not affect you, right? Like I ran yesterday and I'm running today and I'm going to run. And then all of a sudden I've run 14 days in a row by accident or purposefully. And I felt fine. But maybe in that third week, that chronic stress, that overload of stress without the rest at a cellular level finally started to provoke something that was actually physically happening, or like in terms of injury or some kind of sensation mentally and emotionally where you start to feel tired, run down. Often we don't feel those sensations until it's too late.
So like what you're saying is you won't feel injured until past the point of return.
Exactly. So that's why,
You don't want to wait till you feel injured to rest. You
right.
want to rest when you feel good so that you don't get injured. If you
Yes.
wait till you're like crazy sore and like every single tendon in your body is acting up and stuff like hurts, then you've waited too long to rest.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
but
it's your
like you're
insurance.
going to be sore every so often. Things are going to feel tight or off every so often. But that could be a sign that you need more rest or that you need to slow down or like, protein. Like there could be other things, but
Mm-hmm.
rest is like a huge insurance policy against some of these like longer term injuries.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't just say, "Oh, I'm not going to take rest seriously this week because I feel good." Even when you feel good, you should say, "Heck yes, I feel good because I have been diligent and disciplined in my rest." I think another thing, like I love more than anyone, like making running a metaphor about everything and like relating how workflow and running are similar. But I think something that is really different about running, and we really need to be really specific and clear about it, is that running is an impact sport and it incurs impact on your body. And unlike cycling, swimming, or like work, it literally breaks your bones a little bit and it literally breaks your muscles a little bit. And if you do not take intentional time away from those impact forces, they will not repair. And that is how you get stress fractures. And you don't want that because they are no fun and you don't get to run when you have a stress fracture. So taking time off now, like even just 1 day a week, right? Like that's awesome. That's a great amount of rest. Taking 1 day a week can prevent taking months off down the road.
Yeah. So if rest is your insurance policy against kind of those disaster like situations that Zoe mentioned, it's obviously it's a vital thing, right? Because we talk about consistency all the time. Consistency isn't, one run a week for 4 weeks in a row. Consistency is 5 runs a week for 4 weeks in a row
For 10 years.
for many years. I mean, that's really how you start to make breakthroughs and to get stronger. And that's why we, want everyone to look at training in the context of at least 1 year, so you have time to do those builds. And why we account for rest in the process. Sometimes resting on a Monday when you don't need it might feel like extra rest, but that is your insurance policy. It does help you to stay consistent. And when we're thinking about training, it's just like this delicate balance between stress and rest. And without that balance, the growth doesn't really happen. And you can see that when we get into overtraining and things like that, where we're constantly training, but we're on the plateau, or worse, we start to regress, or we have burnout. And those are often caused by moments of many moments of not resting. Um,
For me, when I think about that delicate balance, I always think like if I'm teetering, I get to pick which side I'm going to fall to, right? Like there are always these pivotal moments in training when you're like, should I run that extra mile? Should I do that extra hour of cross training? And I am always, whenever I even have the decision, for me, it's like, should I do more? I always err on the side of no, you should do less at this point,
mm-hmm.
because I am such that like my mental, like plumbing is such that like left to my own devices I would always err on the side of doing too much, which becomes very counterproductive both mentally and physically. So now I know whenever I even like my brain, when it starts to even ask questions like should I do just like an extra mile, or like should I double, or should I cross train, or should I weight lift, if it's even a question for me, I'm like, you know what, I can probably benefit more from rest at this point.
Yeah, and you've actually gotten a lot better at that. And I think it's really
Growth.
challenging.
It can
Yeah,
happen.
it's really challenging, I think, for everybody. And I think for me, I don't feel it as much on the athletic side as I do on the work side, the coaching side. Um, where like taking that step back is really hard, where I'm really like married to the work that I do, and I struggle to like not want to do it. But reinforcing that with yourself and saying it's important to take that step back. It's important to take that step back. It's important to like when I'm tired to not work. It's important when I'm tired to not do that extra cross training day, to listen to your body, whether it's a physical sensation or mental and emotional. If you're already to the point of feeling the sensation, you're sometimes a little late. So you want to stay ahead of it. I think something that is really important I'll just mention, guys, if you are doing cross training, if you're doing doubles, um, there's a few of you on the call. If you're tired and the second workout comes up and you're tired,
Don't do it.
don't do the workout. It's there. It's always optional. Friday cross training is
Always
always
optional.
optional. It's rest first. Train again if you feel good. If you don't rest, that might undermine how good your long run is going to be on Saturday. It could affect more
It's
than that.
always better to have a good long run than like an okay hour of cross. Like no one is
Right.
like, thank God I did that hour of cross training. That really solidified how well I performed in my ultra. You know,
Yeah, I
the
agree.
difference was in that 45-minute Peloton ride I did. I've got to tell you.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about cross training and stuff before, and without diving too much down that rabbit hole, obviously our preference is for you guys to focus on the running side of things. That is where the biggest gains are to be made for everybody at every level, especially if you're thinking about running, a race, an adventure run, an ultra, anything, that's going to put you out on the trails for a couple hours. It's vital that you run in order to get better for those things. Another thing that we see a little bit in winter is athletes skiing on their rest days.
I used to do this. I will say that the biggest difference I have made, or like the biggest like pivotal moment in my athletic career, was taking rest days more seriously.
Yeah, I agree.
Just like if you want to actually grow and progress as an athlete, you have to be very protective of your rest days. And like I used to like really try to justify, I was like, oh, I'm skiing, so it's like not that hard, but it wasn't full rest for me. And particularly as someone that works like a demanding job and who tries to train at an elite level, you have to become very, very protective of those empty spaces and like trying to fill them with like, oh, well, it's only power yoga, or like, well, I won't bike that hard. Like I used to do a lot of mental gymnastics to try to justify not allowing myself to have empty space, which was like a way that I mentally overcompensated for not believing in myself as an athlete. And I think that's where a lot of people can kind of fall on this issue is they're like, well, I mean, like, why I can't rest? Like, there's other people out there Zwifting every day or like, doing like hikes every day. And, rest days, like what they fundamentally are about going all in on your athletic potential. Like, it's not taking a step back or whatever. Like rest days are when that step forward actually happens. What rest days are a radical act of self-belief because you're like, I'm so invested in the process that I know that what I'm doing today is going to set me up for years and years and years of discovering my true potential.
Yeah, I really like that. I think you segued really well into what I would like. I would like us to define rest. I would like you to define rest to the people, because I think we've talked about maybe some other stuff, but we haven't really defined like what resting is.
For me, it's not engaging in any activity to better my fitness that like feels like it's going to like that is a fitness activity. Like for myself, well, fun doorbell. I'll walk on my rest day, and that is truly it. Like even gentle, like I used to do yoga, and I even felt like that was like too close to training to really be a good mental break for myself. Like I don't need any kind of like structured physical activity on my rest days. That doesn't work for me, and that leads to like self-destructive patterns of obsession about structured physical activity. So like having a full day where I really engage with like the intentional process of like connecting with why I do this and making sure that like mentally I'm in a good place about why I do this, and just like giving my body a ton of extra room, like walking. I mean, not to be like, I don't want to be too prescriptive because I know that doesn't work for a lot of people, but like I will not do anything other than like a brisk walk to get groceries or coffee on my rest
So
day.
I'm hearing that rest for you.
It's not weightlifting, it's not power yoga, it's not
Yeah.
like, it's not an aggressive dog hike. Like we would do like a dog walk or like a chill dog like stroll off road, but like nothing that would make my whoop say like you did a thing, like
Yeah.
it needed to. For me, it's like the harder I train, the more protective of my rest days I become.
So kind of what I'm hearing is you describing rest as a focused a loosely focused effort to step away
I would say it's
from the
a very
activity.
focused effort to
Okay.
like, just because like I came into athletics with like a different background than you, and like, I think this is something I learned a lot from you, like as a professional athlete. Like I always felt like I was trying to overcompensate from like not having a very strong athletic background, but I was like,
Hmm.
huh, TJ is like actually a pro athlete and he rests harder than anyone I know. Like he is truly in love with couch time. I need to emulate that to like get to the level I want to be at.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that you're focusing on not only removing yourself from that activity, the physical side of it, but also the mental and emotional
Yeah, for
side
sure.
too. So it's like a disconnection from that thing that you're trying to, that thing that you love to do, whether it's work or whether it's training. It's when you're resting from work, you're disconnecting from work.
Mm-hmm.
When you're resting from training, you're disconnecting from training. So in the context that you mentioned, it's like, well, yoga is a little too closely related for
Yeah.
me to training. So I need to, to step away from that. And some of these other activities that maybe I was doing before, like skiing or whatever, were a little too closely inter connected to my training, so it was beneficial for me to step away from that. So like kind of the definition that I'm gathering from what you're telling me is that when we're truly resting, it's truly disconnecting from the thing that we want to take time away from in order to promote growth. Does that kind of sum up what you're saying in
Yeah,
fewer words, in more concise?
sure, but like mentally, like I felt like taking a lot more space away from training brought me closer to it in a weird way because it was like
Beneficial.
beneficial. Yeah.
Right.
Like the only way, because I am such a motivated person, the only way I could ever convince myself to rest was being like, you're going to train the heck out of today by not running or lifting a weight or like doing a push up or like anything. Like that is how you really nail training today. And I think that like having that connection was really beneficial for my mindset, though I understand that other people have different feelings on it.
Well, I think that was a really good illustration. What about kind of, did you ever try to connect with the like more biological and physiological sides of resting, like reduction of cortisol levels, uh, trying to replenish your glycogen stores, trying to actually recover at a cellular level?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that like there are some really specific biological reasons that we rest, and even if we aren't fully aware that they're going on, they're really important. I think a huge one, and this is something we've learned a lot from Kylie on, is rest day nutrition. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the fact that like during your week of training, you're depleting your glycogen stores. And something that's really important to know about glycogen is that it depletes more quickly than it refills. So rest days are a really important day to eat like a freaking boss. I think a lot of people, depending on their background and relationship to food, might have an impulse to restrict on rest days because they kind of intrinsically tie their activity level to their food intake level, which is not something you want to do as an athlete or human being. Like, no matter how much you do in a day, you should still eat like an athlete, right? Like, whether you ran a marathon or rested, you're an athlete either way. So, you still need to fuel yourself like the athlete boss that you are. And that's really, really important, not just like psychologically, but also because glycogen can just like flow out of like it depletes much faster than it refills, so you
Right.
need to be really intentional about your fuel on rest days and use rest days as like an awesome day to go all in on your like nutrition and not skimp at all.
Yeah, I like that too because Saturday, we're technically, for most people, I don't know everybody's schedule on this call because not all of you are my athletes, but most of my athletes on this call, they do their long run on Saturday. Long runs require a lot of glycogen. We're most likely not going to refill all of those glycogen stores by our Sunday run. So, if we don't eat well on Sunday breakfast and we skip a few calories there, or we don't eat oatmeal, we have a piece of bread instead, we're going to, like we're setting ourselves back. So, by the time we get to Monday, we're really depleted. And glycogen is the most important thing when related to running economy and feeling like you've
Mm-hmm.
got that kick when you're out there. So if we don't eat well on Monday, we enter the training week in a depleted state because of Saturday and Sunday. Long run depletes glycogen stores. It's very difficult to refill them by Sunday. So most likely you're depleted by Monday. So refilling the glycogen stores on Monday is something that we should all be thinking about. It's definitely something that we think about. It's like we want to go into the training week carved up, you know?
Ready to roll, yeah.
Yeah. It's really important. Like having like that pizza on Sunday night or Monday because you know you're refilling your glycogen
Yeah, Monday
stores.
is not your time to be like, oh, well, I'm not running, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to have like some iceberg lettuce. That is when you go, like, I've only had one pizza this week. Monday is a great day to work in that second weekly pizza.
Exactly. And we're not going to have kale salads for dinner tonight, Zoe. Sorry.
TJ hates kale. He's really a failure as a vegan. He hates kale and quinoa.
They're not my favorites.
What else are you supposed to eat?
Pizza. Pasta.
Pizza and pasta.
So good. And Christmas cookies, guys.
Christmas
Christmas
cookies.
cookies are also
We've been getting
huge.
excited
Super
for our
good.
mom's Christmas cookies.
Yeah.
I think another really important thing, like aside from just glycogen, is also cortisol. And I know this is something we've talked about on a lot of previous calls, but it's that exercise, um, exercise releases cortisol. Like basically anything over a brisk walk, your adrenal glands are going to release some amount of cortisol. And it's really, really important that you use Monday as a reset because your body needs time to process and move all of that cortisol out of your system and kind of like reestablish a good baseline before we reintroduce a crap ton of cortisol through another week of training. Because if you're just like, cortisol, 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 cortisol all day, every day, that's going to be really, really bad. So it just leads to, I mean, mentally not great. Physically, it also just leads to breakdown, and you really need to have some kind of interruption in that cortisol cycle. And I think that's like, that also speaks to the fact that like cortisol can be released, like if you have a challenging experience getting snow tires on your car. So like, don't make Monday, you're like, well, I'm not running, so I'm going to do every single heinous, obnoxious, like adulty life chore that I usually do in a week. I'm going to do all of that on Monday. Don't do that. Like, understandably, like scheduling is hard, and like Monday is a freer day. So like, yeah, sometimes that is like when I will personally, I have the bad habit of like front loading my week with Zoom calls and like random, journalist writery stuff. But as much as possible, try to not like make Monday a mentally and emotionally like just like soul wrenching day for yourself, because that's not conducive to good training either. You need to kind of set it up to be a day where you're like, I'm really intentionally not going to give myself things that will release a ton of cortisol.
Yeah, I agree with that. Trying to take that space is really important. CT has a really good follow-up related question. Is there an issue with going too hard the day after your rest day? I feel like I can have a tendency to push hard because I have more short-term power from those glycogen store gains on my rest day. I think this really varies from athlete to athlete, which is kind of why we're gonna get in a little bit to some rest day routine stuff.
Can't wait to talk about blood volume.
Yeah, with
There's always a risk in going too hard. All of your
yes.
days, like hard is gonna, or easy is gonna, easy should always feel easy, but whatever the random pace that gets assigned to whatever your easy effort is on a given day is gonna change. If you're ever like, if you know that you're the type of person who might be a little bit likely to go too hard after a rest day, then you can use your very smart brain to intentionally reel it in, because you don't want to see, like, a bad week of training would be like a week where you're like fast, less fast, grindy, or like fast, terrible, worse. Like you don't want to be like decreasing in like effort and quality of runs over the course of the week.
Yeah, CT, I can kind of relate to that. Tuesday tends to be a fast day for me because I feel really refreshed after a day off. And I think that it's natural to sometimes feel really good the first day back.
And
Now,
you
a
should,
lot
like,
of
we want you to feel really
right,
good.
but to be fair, a lot of other athletes struggle because they're not as active on Monday, so they come back Tuesday stiffer and they don't feel as loose or as quick. And I think it's important to remember Tuesday, what follows Tuesday, your workout day. So if you go too hard on Tuesday, you might be leaving something off the on the table for your workout on Wednesday. So I think something that I've been working on over the last 6 months a lot is to, even though I can fly on a Tuesday, I'm running 8 minute miles because I want to fly during my intervals. And it's, you have to be super intentional. And sometimes responding to the flow state feel that you have, it's helpful. It's good for, provoking breakthroughs and getting more comfortable running fast over time, which allows your easy effort
But if
pace
you're
to
always doing
drop.
that, if you like go balls to the wall on Tuesday and then Wednesday and Thursday you're like, oh my god, I want to die, that's less beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, yeah, exactly. Like you want to set yourself up for success here. So if you're feeling good, respond to it, but know that you don't want to do anything on a Tuesday other than what is assigned. For most people, that's going to be hill work. You want to do the hill work strong, go very easy on the easy parts, and set yourself up for success on Tuesday so you can run intervals at your best output levels.
On the other end of the spectrum, there are some people who feel that they don't respond acutely, they don't respond to rest super well, and that's super normal. Like if you're the person who like takes Monday off and you come back Tuesday and you're like, oh my god, I feel like I've never run a mile before in my life, my legs feel so weird, I feel a little bit sluggish, like I'm right there with you, and that's totally normal. And there's some biological reasons behind that. Rest can reduce your blood volume, which basically just means like you have a little less blood and you're going to feel a tiny bit more fatigued. So some ways to combat that are A, taking a nice hot bath, like get in the jacuzzi, have some wine, like just like chill in a really nice hot bath for like 20 minutes. Boom, problem solved. Your volume is like definitely back to normal. Another thing is that neuromuscularly, which is just neuromuscular is like how your brain and muscles respond, which is something that you're very acutely aware of, particularly if you trail run and you're like, oh man, like brain body connection challenging. Taking time off can kind of make that connection a little bit more challenging for some people, and this manifests differently in every athlete. But like, if you come back from rest days and you feel a tiny bit more fatigued or like a tiny bit more like a weird baby deer who's never taken steps before, that's totally normal, and it's still important that you like engage in your rest day with the same vigor that you would a workout. Some like pretty easy, I mean, with the neuromuscular stuff, there's not really much you can do about that. But that is why we don't rest the day before races. That is why we want you out like running just like a tiny amount the day before like races or big events, is because we don't want a drastic reduction in blood volume or in neuromuscular communication. Like we try to keep those things going with just a 30-minute shakeout, usually the morning before your runs. But with it just means like on Tuesday, if you're someone who is not like CT and you don't feel amazing and just like glycogen stores are rip roaring and ready to go, that's totally normal and okay. And just like take a few more baths and be nice to yourself.
Yeah. A couple other like cool routines. If you struggle with stillness on your rest days, it can be really great to do your pre-run warm up, take it nice and chill, and then instead of doing a run after, just do a walk.
I like
And
that.
then you can come home and do your kind of your 2 minute plank and a few push ups to cool down. Another thing is like, we don't want people to do a lot of strength work on rest days. It's very connected to
In
running
fact,
and
I would
training.
say don't do strength work on rest
Yeah, I
days.
mean, honestly, if I had my way, I would like you guys to not do that. But I know that everybody does different things on their rest days. I would suggest replacing any strength routine that you do beyond a 2 minute plank and a few push ups if you're going to kind of practice your normal routine and replace the run with the walk, is to maybe do some light stretching or some yoga. And I wouldn't do, crazy hot yoga or like things that are challenging. I would kind of veer towards the side of like gentle stretching and more of like stress relief and in the breathing aspect of it where you're kind of connecting breath and body. That's, I think, would be really helpful. You can also kind of, I like rest days for building other kind of parts, for building up like my tool set. So I'll engage in other activities that are non-running related. Um, and I think that that can be helpful for people too. If you have hobbies and things like that, rest days are great, and you can build a routine around your hobbies. Another thing that we really love, especially me, is chilling on the couch and watching Netflix. If you want anything that you can do to reduce your mental and emotional fatigue and to disconnect from running is watch something and don't let it be running related.
I would like to volunteer myself for part of a study that looks at how much cortisol my body produces when watching Game of Thrones. Because it feels
Too
like a
much.
crap ton.
Too
It
much.
feels way worse than like any training run. It's just like watching my favorite characters get like slaughtered indiscriminately. It I feel that watching Game of Thrones undermines my rest day. And I would like to have science validate that impulse.
I think anything that is too stimulating is going to cause a sympathetic nervous system, nervous response, and your cortisol is going to go up. So Game of
I want to
Thrones
see
would
how much
definitely,
though.
we
Like I
could
feel like
probably
if
measure
I
this.
got a blood test after a workout and then after Game of Thrones, they would like not be able to tell. They would be like, "There's maybe a little bit extra like muscle breakdown here, but whatever happened here wasn't great either."
Whatever you're doing, I would
Make it
just
be restful,
make,
mentally and
yeah.
emotionally as
And
well.
I would make sure that, you know, the habits that you form, you know, they promote self-love and compassion. If you are working towards reducing the amount of activity you do on your rest days and you have feelings otherwise linked to your self-worth or your value and you slip up and you do something else, try not to judge that. It's really difficult to build new habits. A lot of these things are deeply interconnected with other things that we're working through as humans, and know that like it's okay to slip up. We can rest the next day. You know, it's something I do with athletes who want to ski all day on a Monday. Well, let's rest on Tuesday because, you know, sometimes that's how life happens. I try to give everybody an opportunity to get that rest, even if we need to move it around. So it's
I think
important to not be judgmental about
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a really important point that also illustrates like another reason that we don't do makeup miles is because like for instance, if you work a 12-hour day at work and you miss your run and then you try to make it up on your rest day, like that 12-hour work day wasn't a bonus rest day. Like I don't think you could argue that having a day that's so stressful that causes you to miss your run, you're like, "Oh yeah, I felt so replenished after having a terrible 12-hour workday that caused me to miss my run." And that's why we really are protective of that rest space is because you can't just like keep shuffling runs forward because it'll inevitably cut into your rest.
It really will. I think another thing that kind of cuts into rest is like our ability, and you kind of, we kind when we describe rest, when we defined it, we kind of define it as this period where we disconnect from that thing that was kind of causing us that stress, right? So for people, this can also really apply to work situations too. We're coming into the holidays. People are getting extra days off and time off of work. For people like me or Zoe, it can be hard to feel like you're off on a day off from work, or it can be like difficult sometimes on my rest days to feel like I'm really resting from running. So disconnecting. How do we disconnect? How do we truly rest? I think it's trying our best to disconnect in a natural way. And so, you know, one of the things that we recommend in terms of routine is developing a mindfulness and meditation routine in order to help you to truly disconnect and be present in the things that you're doing. That way you can have true rest. If you're sitting on the couch trying to rest, but you're thinking about writing something in your training log, or you're thinking about an upcoming race that you're planning for, if you're planning your run for tomorrow, you're kind of engaging in the running process. And I would advise that you turn your mind off to those kind of things. Running is amazing, but it's not all that there is. And if we're too driven to think about it all the time, if we're too driven to think about coaching or journalism or writing all the time, it's hard to get the break that we need to create the breakthroughs. So, you know,
You
one,
can pause your inbox if you have a Google inbox. It's a new trick I've learned that I'm very into.
I didn't know that trick. That is a very, very cool trick. Um, you'll have to teach
Yeah,
me
it's
that
great
after
because like
this.
I'm the kind of person like if I see an email come in, I'm like, well, I mean it's 2 a.m., but like I should probably respond, which is a really unhealthy impulse. And making it so that I can control the cues that trigger action on my part is really huge.
Yeah,
So
that's so
like no
important.
notifications, pause the inbox, having a decent out of office email that makes me like at least feel like, all right, like this person contacted me, but like they know I'm not getting back to them. That takes like some pressure off.
Yeah, and that's good for the disconnection process because if we constantly have the stream of text, the stream of emails, it can be very easy to give into that and start working on a day that would be better suited as a day off. Um, and we want the time off needs to be rejuvenating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in order, if Monday is rejuvenating, you're going to be flying like CT on Tuesday, like, but if it's not that rejuvenating, it's going to be tough to feel your best. You might feel a little lethargic or stiff out there. Um, so, I really do. We've written a blog on this and talked about it in Rapid Fire Friday. Developing a mindfulness and meditation routine is going to help you tremendously to become more present in whatever you're doing, whether it's resting or trail running, whether it's working or spending time with your family, whether it's accounting and doing your taxes or something more fun. It's these are, this is a specific tool that's going to be used to train your mind to be more present and focused in the thing that you do. Um, a few minutes a day, like anything else, frequency is how you get better and how you allow it to work for you. If you do it every once in a while, it doesn't work for you that well. It can be relieving in the moment, but sometimes some of the other benefits that we get from the practice, like being able to kind of control our state when we're in a stressful situation and be able to like actively choose how we react to that. If we're, meditators tend to do better in those situations according to the studies. So there are benefits to this kind of stuff in a broader sense. For me, I feel like it helps me really rest. It helps me with feeling better about my boundary setting and to reinforce like that my rest is for me. It's not time to coach. It's not time to go on YouTube and look up videos on any sort of training topics, which I used to do all the time. And it was just, or to pick up a book about.
You'd be like, I'm so relaxed. I'm just like
super,
Googling
yeah.
everything that there is to know about running form ever. Like, so chill.
Yeah, Steve Magnus said this.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're supposed to be resting. Like, oh yeah, that's
Having
right.
the best rest day ever.
So yeah, without, I don't know, spending too much time or like harping on it, I really
If you're
recommend
someone that
mindfulness.
struggles with stillness, some action steps I have for you, because you're a person that probably loves the phrase action steps, and we should be best friends because we have the same disease. Mindfulness and meditation are huge. Like just having something like, I always think of my brain as like a weird dog, and it just like always needs something to chew on. If I like try to take like training away, it's like, well, I'm gonna, you took my toy away, I'm just gonna chew up your shoes now. Like that is how my brain works. So I'm like, great, like here's this mindfulness like training. Here's meditation. Here's like something else that can help you not fixate on this thing, and it's like a cool new thing that you can focus on, but it's gonna be productive instead of undermining your like long-term physical and mental health. And so I think meditation and mindfulness training, like I am not a cool, chill person, like don't love sandals or like patchouli, but meditation is awesome. And if you're someone who's like, that's not for me, you should definitely try it because I was the same way and it's been hugely beneficial. Secondarily, if you really, really struggle with rest, and it's not just because your brain is like a dog that needs a chew toy, but there's some like deeper underlying issues that running and two coaches can't fix, then you should think about expanding like your support system and investigating why it is that you really struggle with stillness, and if there potentially could be some activity dependency issues, some self-worth or self-esteem issues that need to be addressed, and really investigate your relationship with movement in a healthy way, preferably guided by a professional who really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think that that's a constant conversation that we have, when we talk about, why, or at least for me, like, why do I struggle with taking days off from my job, which is coaching? A lot of that comes from, how I, value myself and consider myself and how, I like what I think my self-worth is as a coach and all of that. And I sometimes society and the information that we get makes us feel like we need to work more and more to build up our self-worth. And the fact of the matter is there's huge diminishing returns from that kind of attitude and those practices. Burnout is very real. taking steps back, huge steps back in whatever it is that you're doing is really real because of being too engaged in something. So, you
And
know,
like not for the right reason, right? Like
right,
wanting to train
right.
because you love training is one thing, and if that's kind of where you're coming from, then you're going to have a much easier time resting. Like if your goals are these like positive healthy things like I want to grow as a person and an athlete, taking one day off a week is not going to feel like a huge deal. If it starts to feel like a huge deal, to me that might suggest that your motivation is coming from somewhere else and might not be quite as healthy, and once again could be investigated through the help of a mindfulness routine or a trained professional.
Yeah, and like your productivity, how you race, how you train, it's never tied to your self-worth as a person. We
Totally.
don't view it as that or as any we don't view the two as connected. You can do great in a race, you can do terribly. We love you just the same. You can crush a week of training or you can run 0 days. We love you just the same, but consistency is great, but still, it's not
It doesn't
everything,
define
right?
you.
It doesn't define you. I like
Yeah.
that. And you're not valued in terms of how many miles you run or how many projects you put out at work or how many articles you write. And we have to continue to reinforce to ourselves that although society sometimes wants us to believe that that's true, it's not. It's not true at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. And I feel like when I was just starting to become an athlete, like right as I was starting to work with a coach and like getting to know TJ and like really trying to like put myself out there and race elite races, I used to be like, yeah, to be a good athlete, I need to be like really hard on myself and like really watch what I eat and like really, get a lot done and like really every day I've got to be like so tough. And that's just like was never productive and I was tired and like sad and cranky all the time. And truly the biggest things that you can do as an athlete is sleep more, rest more, and eat a bunch of pizza bagels. Like those are like I know it sounds really cheesy, but like my athletic career did not take off till I slept more, rested more, and ate more.
Yeah, and I think that gave you the ability to buckle down when you needed to,
It
focus
let me
hard when
buckle
you
down
needed
when I
to.
needed to, and when I didn't need to, it let me be like, today's a goose egg, time for a pizza bagel.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, well, anyways, yeah, you've grown so much in those areas, and I think
Used to
it's
ski on rest days and I regret it so much.
yeah, and it's important to I think to sometimes check in with yourself, and that's kind of what the newsletter was all about, and what we've been talking about. For the holidays for you guys is kind of valuing where you are today and looking at where you started and where you are now, and knowing that you've gone through a ton, you've grown so much, and like sometimes without taking a few minutes to just kind of introspect on that growth and be like, I used to do all sorts of things on my rest day that wasn't probably great
I
for me,
mean,
and here I
it's
am today.
crazy. Like when I didn't take rest, now that I rest seriously, I can run on average 20 additional miles per week. But I'm resting more. Like that's crazy. And that's like the weird paradox of training is that since I always used to run a little too hard, a little too often, I was like always just like flirting with like maybe I'll explode and never come back from this run or like whatever, like metabolically explode. But now that I am really intentional about my rest and my Mondays are all about chilling, I can pursue mileage that years ago didn't feel possible to me. And like
Yeah,
it feels really easy now and I can still be like, "Oh, maybe I'll take Friday off." And it like doesn't even matter because all my other days are so consistent because rest is just like the pillar of my training.
I love that. Yeah, rest is definitely a pillar. It's as we kind of mentioned when we did the call on how to simplify your training, right? Like
Yeah.
that is one of the pillars.
And it gets easier with practice. Like, definitely when I started training, I was not someone that was like, yay, love rest, so easy to embrace it. That was not at all where I was coming from. But now that I've been practicing it very intentionally for years, it does get easier. So, like, if you really intentionally engage with that process, it will feel better. And it's okay if you're kind of at the point where right now you're like, rest doesn't always come super naturally and I feel weird about it, but I'm like, I totally believe in myself and I'm going to go all in. It does get better. Now I
Yeah.
like don't even think about like rest days used to be like this like every time I would like face an existential crisis about like what my value as a person was, and now I'm like awesome, more time to eat and nap.
That's awesome. Yeah. I have to mention here, Jess, she just ran an awesome 50K over the weekend, coming off of a 100K.
That's
like
amazing.
6 weeks or 8 weeks ago, and like the back-to-back turnaround, she really had to embrace rest a lot and adjust expectations along the way. Great work, amazing. But I have to give a shout out to your routine, taking the 60 to 90 minutes that you normally would spend running on a Monday, using that for time for yourself, sleeping in, taking an Epsom salt bath. That is huge. Just taking that time for yourself to kind of disconnect and to reset mentally and emotionally and physically too. It really goes a long way. I think as we saw over the weekend running a super fast time at that 50K. Great job. Um, yeah,
That's amazing. Way to go.
I feel like we've kind of covered the what we wanted to talk about with the
Yeah.
rest. What do you
Except for
think?
that, and TJ's gonna get so embarrassed. But he ate a giant bucket of lo mein noodles in a hot bath the other day, and he's a recovery genius. There is no massage gun on earth that is as good for you as a bucket of noodles in the bathtub.
Tofu.
Tofu.
Yeah,
It was tofu.
so awesome. Oh man, what day was that? Oh my God,
Wasn't
every
that
day
after your
feels
long
the
run?
same.
Or was that
Yeah,
after
that was
Sunday?
Saturday after my long run. Oh man,
I
I
came
love
home just like
Saturdays.
TJ's in the bathtub with like a bowl of food.
That was the best.
Yeah. That's
Well,
how you
cool.
do it right.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you guys. Yeah. So I guess just to kind of summarize everything,
It's cool to eat in the bath.
it's
There's no
that's
more rules.
yeah. Do what you want. Make
Live your
sure you're
life.
taking a hot
Live your
bath.
life as long as you rest.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think we need to say anything else about it. Uh, whatever rest you're doing, make sure there's some intention behind it. Try to disconnect from the activity or job or whatever, running, whatever it is that you're resting for. Everything you need rest, running or otherwise. Yeah. I'm out of words, so we
Yeah.
took it away talking about the bath. That was too much.
I was like, this man is a genius.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for that.
I had to sneak that in.
Oh man. Yeah, that was one of my best recovery moments for sure. Well, cool. Thanks. We appreciate you guys. I'm done. If Zoe's got anything else to say, we'll
I
be
have
back
nothing
in
else to add to the
January.
rest canon after that stroke of genius.
Yeah. I hope you guys take your rest over the holidays seriously. I know many of you expressed to me that you're feeling burned out at work. I know sometimes what that feels like. Try to really disconnect from that over the holidays. Be
Eat
present.
something awesome in the bathtub.
Yeah.
That's just like gotta cure everything.
Well, Christmas cookies in the
Christmas
bath.
cookies in the bathtub.
That's gonna be pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's epic.
I'm looking forward
That's
to
next
that.
level.
Well, cool. Thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a great like six
We did
months
it.
straight
It's
of doing
2020
these
is
calls.
almost over.
And yeah.
Things may or may not get any better with the next year, but we'll be here, and that's pretty awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
Because we didn't start 2020 with calls, so I don't
No.
know. Just thinking about like the new stuff that's happening in this community, the new things we've built, like, there's nowhere to go but up.
And rest is part of the equation.
Oh, for sure.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you
We love you
live
guys so
on
much.
January 15th. If not, we'll be in the logs and the emails and all of that in the meantime. I hope you
Yeah.
guys have great holidays.
Happy
Yeah.
holidays. Enjoy time with family.
Bye.
We love you.